Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tuesdays with Trailblazers, brought to you by TechAI, the video podcast where we bring you the latest trends and insights in AI and technology. I'm your host, Siddesh, and today we have with us Lukas N.P. VP of Product, Strategy, and Innovation at SAP. He leads cutting edge AI initiatives, he risks ambitious projects, and drives product discovery to create transformative solutions. So, without further ado, let's welcome Lucas. Hey, Lucas, how you doing today?
Thanks for having me, Sid. And it's always nice to hear from somebody else your job description because you're like, oh, that doesn't sound that bad, actually.
Well, we're quite excited to see what amazing insights you have for us. But before we jump on the questions, Lucas, because I did a bit of background check on you as well, and how you turned out to be another podcast host. So I would like to ask, as the host of the Process Transformers podcast, you've spoken with a wide range of leaders, right? So what's with that one insight from those conversations that genuinely changed how you think about transformation?
That's a very good question. I would say that maybe in not intuitive or not expected learning out of those conversations is that from a distance, you always believe it must be so much easier for the others. And every person struggles with transformation. It doesn't matter where you are, whether you're perceived as already winning the game and being ahead and super fast. Nobody ever said transformation is easy. It's counterintuitive in a sense because there's people who make it their business to help organizations or people to change or processes, right? Like us. But the honest answer is even if you are perceived as winning, like it's not easy. And I think there is some poetic fairness to it, right? It's not like you have a predisposition or fate is kissing you and your business model and everything falls into your lap. Like nobody out there can really rest. And maybe tying it to news. Remember how a year ago we thought Google is completely doomed and Microsoft is winning everything in the AI race of about how they were set up? Now, today, Microsoft is being punished at the markets and Google is like, oh, it's fully awakened and it's like the strongest model out there and so forth. So even for the biggest companies with hundreds thousands of people and more money than God, right? Even they, like within 12 months, like everything can change and they're like, uphill battle again. We're trying in the podcast to elucidate what it means to get good at dealing with the complexities that are now happening when we change. And the counterintuitive learning is we all struggle, and each and every struggle has similarities to others, but they're all unique in their own.
Now, curious to know this as well. When you're on the other side of the mic,
Mhm.
what kind of questions tend to unlock the most honest or interesting conversations?
That's tough because I try to, with my questions, I always want to elucidate how are you dealing with the challenges of new technologies or high risk projects. I think it's less about like asking like one specific question, but going through a process of talking about relevant things and coming to a point where maybe stuff is not fully figured out. Right? If you ask me, hey, Lucas, what is innovation to you? I have it's not rehearsed, but like being in that industry for more than 10 years, 15 years at this point, I'm like, it's like systematically lowering the cost of failure. And then I can explain it in 5 different varieties and great. When you really want to unlock something where people maybe go like, that's fascinating and it speaks to me, it's something true. I think it very often materializes when both parties, both sides, right, the guest and the host, are not fully clear on what's going on, right? They are like, it's sometimes you say like, I'm sorry I had to talk so much about this topic. I hadn't had enough time. In a way, you're still wrestling with it. You're still like, it's an open question and you're not fully decided. If you can get to that sweet spot of where people are trying to figure it out and not like have like a rehearsed answer and put it at acta, right? We have talked about it. I've made up my mind. No, it's like it's still an ongoing project. I think that's where a lot of the really revealing and interesting stuff happens.
Makes total sense if I think about it. Coming back to the actual topics, apart from the podcast. Okay, Lucas, where do you think where are organizations confusing speed of adoption with, let's say, real strategic progress, and what opportunities does that confusion actually cost?
That's a very loaded question. There are so many things to tease apart. Okay, before I will answer, and I'm sorry if I'm overcomplicating things, but I will maybe tease out a couple of things, right? So for me, first and foremost, when you say like, "Hey, strategy," like let's quickly make sure we're on the same page. When people talk about strategic decisions, I think a lot of companies have not mistaken, but they are used to using the word planning when they say strategy or vice versa, meaning like for them strategy is about turning like ideas into execution, and it's very often like a little bit more operational or near term focused. And I feel like strategy to me is deciding what kind of game you want to play and by which or what rules, right? It's really like very foundational questions. Also, I would say for me personally, strategy is not just like how do we make more money, because there is like a very famous business person, Peter Drucker, right, the grandfather of business strategy, and he said something which stuck with me. As he said, like, making money is like breathing to a human. If you don't breathe, you die. But just breathing is not enough for a happy life or a good life, right? So making money, every company needs to do that, but there should be a bit more. So that's why I'm like, okay, if we talk about what does it mean to make good strategic decisions, right? To me, that all like is a bit more aspirational, as maybe sometimes people talk about it when they say like, hey, what's going on with strategic decisions? And now, why am I talking about that first? I do believe we're currently in a phase where there is a new transformational technology that compels each business to answer questions about what their strategy is going to be or how they will work on it. What do I mean by that? I believe whenever, historically speaking, there were big transformational changes, the people who reformulated their strategies, adopted to the new environment, had outsized gains. So that to me is the opportunity that lies ahead. We already know, we see it ahead of us. We have line of sight to AI is changing pretty much every business to some extent. Not everybody has answered how they want to react. And historically speaking, we also know that businesses who just go with what has been done in the past tend to miss out on the biggest upside. You cannot win the most if you try to just continue with what has been done if everything is changing. Now, what does that mean? I think right now, and I don't blame anyone, that's perfectly fair, by the way. Let me say that up front. I think it's most companies look at AI in particular and go like, hey, how can I be more efficient? Can I make sure that I do the things I'm already doing more effectively? And how can I cut like stuff, cost savings, and how can I incorporate that into my business? I would say that's wonderful. Do it. There is never a reason not to do it, but it cannot be all, because you need to realize that how value creation will look like 3 to 5 years from now will be very different from today. So you need to cut today, but you also need to think about how your business will be completely different 5 years from now. And that is something where I would see currently the tension.
That certain organizations do it for the fact that the others are doing it, and they just want to jump on that bandwagon.
100%. And nobody ever has to come clean about how good they are, right? There was like a saying, I think it was Dan Ariely, and I will not quote him at verbatim because I think that that's not possible. But he said something like, back in the days, 10 years ago, AI is like teenage dating, accuses everybody else of doing it. Nobody knows what's really going on. And the few people who are doing it really badly. So in a way, that's how I feel like AI adoption, even 10 years later now with like LLMs and like the new technologies that came online, it still plays out to some extent.
That's the first one, to be honest. No one's actually compared AI to a teenage dating site first before this. And that's the first one on this one.
Like, I recommend looking up the actual quote. It's just not safe for work.
Okay. Perfect. Now, Lucas, many enterprises still treat AI like, let's say, plug and play software. Why does that
Mhm.
mindset often lead to wasted budgets and disappointing results?
There's a couple of reasons. I would say let's go into one or two and then let's see if you want to tease out more. I think the most important one is that we are used to technology that is constrained and predictive in a sense like, hey, it does one certain aspect. So very often in businesses, we have an idea of our processes or how technology plugs into what we do. Like, let's use an analogy like Lego bricks. You just connect them, right? Plug and play. You said, right? That's what we would ideally want, right? And I think that to some extent, during the last cloud era with SaaS companies, there were certain interfaces where you really people optimize to be like a solution that you can plug into a bigger suite and they work together. Now, if you think of your business as an assortment of Lego bricks that you use and build something bigger, I think that's a beautiful picture, but it ultimately fails, especially with AI. It can help you with some aspects of thinking about your business. But the better analogy is think of it as a team sport. If you play a team sport, I don't know which one you like, whether it's rugby, soccer. Okay, fantastic. If you have whatever historically the soccer player you like best, whether it was Ronaldo or whatever, right? It was clear if you change the people on the pitch, right? You changed like one player out, you would have to change the strategy. It would not make sense to play exactly the same game if you have a fundamentally different kind of player. Or at least you would give an advantage to the other team if you played the same game, but you had someone who was much better, let's say, at a certain type of game and just didn't incorporate it. And that's what we're seeing with companies. If you believe you take such a vastly different type of technology and you put it into your systems and you want to play exactly the same game, best case scenario is nothing explodes. But more likely, it will showcase that other parts of your processes will not work as well and it will degrade the rest of your operations. That's why you have to re-engineer and reinvent overall processes that you're touching because you want to get the most out of them. And now here's a tie to my, let's say, my mundane everyday life. Companies like, for instance, we SAP Signavio try to provide tools that make it easy to understand what the setup of the, let's say, all those Lego bricks or the team players are. You get the KPIs, you get the understanding of what's going on in your processes, in your business, because how can you expect something outsized positive to materialize if you don't understand like what it is that's currently going well for you or that's not going well, right? So you need to have the telemetry and the understanding. And if you look at a business where really the rubber meets the road are the processes, because they are essentially the constitution of what's really happening in your business, right? It's not the aspirational, we hope everybody agrees on those values. No, it's this is how we escalate customer service requests. This is how we do the procure to pay process, whatever it is. And so I think the plug and play analogy made sense in the past, maybe more than it does today, because the technology inherently asks you or compels you to re-engineer processes if you stick it in, right? The AI part. And yeah, that's where I guess the misconception comes from.
Absolutely. And don't hinder yourself to, when you've got AI, you've got limited possibilities, right? So why do you want to probably just limit yourself to plug and play?
Absolutely. And by the way, it's also important to say that in the past, sometimes we had problems where we could spend ourselves out of the problem. You could, let's say, a company, and you did not have fantastic processes in place. When I talk about a process, what I mean is like order to cash fulfillment, like hire to retire, like how you run, like how you work as a company. And you could throw money in it and you could buy into, let's say, better stuff. If you want a technology that can do work for you, you have to re-engineer how you work with it. You cannot just say like, okay, I pay money and it's done. So I would strongly advise anybody who listens to say, take it as a challenge to unlock this potential for you. Because if you just buy something that is not plug and play, because we just talked about it for 3 minutes, then you're missing out on the biggest upside if you're pretending it is, right? And you will be most likely underwhelmed, or you will just, per definition, get what everybody else gets. And then how can you be differentiated and winning? if you're per definition only using what everybody else is also using.
Makes perfect sense. Now, you just said AI resilience. I know, but when I actually contemplate on what you've said, and because I'm trying to have my own understanding of it, and the reason I use that very often is because when I'm into that mode, when I'm thinking about it, and I'm like with you on that one, I usually ask myself, or I usually say to myself, this actually makes sense, and that's exactly why it comes so many times. Perfect. So, Lucas, you've just said that, AI resilience requires re-engineering
Mhm.
operating models, not just layering intelligence on top, right? So, what tends to break when companies try to put AI onto legacy ways of working?
So there's a short and a long answer. Because I feel like I gave very long answers previously, I will try for once a short answer. And the short answer is everything breaks to some extent. But the more important aspect of it is that the way when you introduce new technology into your company, into your processes, especially if it's a non deterministic technology, it breaks in novel and unexpected ways that you're maybe not familiar with. And it's not just contained to, oh, how I do my order to cash or whatever. Like, by the way, that is for us a very easy way of talking about businesses because every business needs to, I don't know, create an invoice or whatever. So it's like a baseline attribute that I refer to quite often simply because it touches every business. Like what I'm trying to say is it's not only on that level, right? Just the sheer process level. It also extends to compliance, risk, governance. It also applies to the incentive structures because in the end, you have to sell something. Otherwise, you're not a business. You're a hobby or an NGO. So if you want to sell something, there's people who are intently incentivized to do certain things and other things not. Show me your incentive structures and I will show you your business, or I will know your business. I think that was a Munger quote or something, Charlie Munger. Anyway, if you think you can get through this without understanding all of these parts, well, you are either the luckiest business owner on earth or you will need help. And then what you need in terms of help is wherever those aberrations or like those breakouts happen, you need to be able to see, like, okay, this is what's going on. So, first and foremost, you want to update onto the newest and greatest technology means you have to look inside and you need to understand what your business does. And you need to be able to decide which things are important to you and be able to track them in a meaningful way. And that's why now businesses like the industry we work in, process mining, business transformation management, all these things, they have very similar messages. And you need to be on top of what you're trying to achieve, and you need to be able to turn it from something aspirational into something that's operational, numbers, and understanding. It's very simple.
Is it safe to say that it always breaks when you try to put AI on legacy ways, or are you sitting on the fence on this one?
My brain loves those corner cases and edge cases, right? So this question is like candy to me. I would say no, it does not necessarily break, but chances are if it doesn't break something in your business, or let's say break is a very harsh term. If it doesn't push in an uncomfortable way, it probably won't be a source of differentiation and a lot of upside either. You can do things that are maybe totally risk free and nothing bad will happen, but then chances are that either other people can replicate it extremely easily or it can be taken away easily. That's typically the things that give the greatest upside are the things that go deep into your business because your business has figured something out that is not trivial and creates value for the customers. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. And if you have to go into the underbelly of how you run your company and you change it, like that is never like full circle goes back to your first or second question. Nobody ever feels like that is like an easy task to achieve.
God, it's so safe to say you're sitting on the fence on this one, right? Yeah, okay. So, Lucas, a lot of companies are still stuck in pilot mode, right? So, what does it really take to move from isolated experiments to enterprise-wide transformation with measurable outcomes?
No, I mean, I'm throwing around like those big words very easily, so I shouldn't be upset if I get confronted with them. Everybody would want to have an easy answer to that. The interesting part is that I believe there is actually an easy answer, but nobody likes to hear it. Let me give you an analogy. Sid, I can explain to you in probably less than 2 minutes how you will successfully complete a marathon. Because it's not extremely hard. We need to talk about CO2 max training and like a little bit like doing every week, like at least 3 to 5 times CO2 max training or endurance training, and then progressively increasing like the time on the runs on the weekend. So what I'm trying to say is like I can very quickly explain to you in a sense that even if you don't know all the details, like how you could succeed running a marathon if that was your goal. Most people still don't want to run it because it's just hard work. Now, and the same is true in making innovation succeed at a big company. I can very quickly explain it, and actually already threw in like the definition at the beginning. I said like systematically lowering the cost of failure. And if you really spell that one out and think it through, you're 90% done. And most of the success is not inspiration, it's transpiration, meaning you sweat it through. You have to do it every day and it's not fun. But that's the thing that really like achieves the outsized results in the long run. Now, but let me not be so vague. Let me break it down maybe into something that are more sound bites that can be used for people who want to impress like internally, say like, hey, I figured it out. I do think it's extremely hard to win if you're not ambidextrous as an organization. You have to have an ability to have speedboats or like parts of your company work a little bit faster than the rest of the company, and you need to be good at managing them because there's always a natural like tendency to either outrun the big company and get like completely like not forlorn but like independent, so you don't feed back the learnings and the results, and you can't bring to production or back to the main company the results, or they're just too tight and they never have the freedom to explore and sample the opportunity space and really create outsized wins. So you have to have like a little bit of an art or skill like that's artsy in terms of like managing an ambidextrous organization. I also think you need to have some sort of a mindset that you will have escalation paths to accelerate certain things. Don't approve every use case for AI. Clear patterns like, hey, if we don't touch customer data and there is no like legal risk, you're just pre-approved. Do what you want to try. You don't need to go through all the hoops and red tape for certain paths. You need to enable people to have safe spaces for exploration. And that can be because of the procedural parts or of just the enablement in terms of like, hey, we're allowed to use this technology. There's budget for that. So there are a couple of, let's say, tactical things, but that would be now like another 20 minutes, right, to go through all of them. But ultimately, the game plan is systematically lower the cost of failure. And nobody wants to hear that.
Absolutely. And I'm pretty much sure that a lot of companies are keen to understand the answer to these questions, although it's a very simple answer, as you said. But yeah, you can probably have another podcast, a 20-minute podcast only about this question so that, we can actually help a lot of other companies out there which are actually finding these answers.
Yeah. And I'm not pretending it's easy, right? So just to give you one more example, because I said like there's tactical stuff and I rattled down 2 or 3. Another one is the social currency in the company. If you say like, hey, we're all in on AI and everybody needs to do it, and then you're in a leadership call and it's clear that none of the leaders are using AI in their everyday work life. People are smart in a sense. They will understand what the social like currency is, and they will like look at those also like social cues. So it can be many, many different things, and it's not easy, right? But still it should be clear if you take it serious.
Now, Lucas, I'd like to drift a bit and talk about agentic AI now. Pricing, as we know, agentic AI is kind of still unsettled, right? So why is there no single right pricing model, and what will ultimately shape how agents are, monetized?
All your questions are really hard questions. So I'm not sure who came up with them, whether it was you, Sid, or somebody else, but kudos to the person who thought about those questions. And just for the audience, Like we just aligned on like topics, right? So this is definitely a topic that I'm personally interested in, simply because I believe that we over index on the technology. Oh, look what this AI can do for us. And we underestimate what the go to market business model innovation needs to do in order to make it scale, right? You can have the greatest technology, but if you are not aligning with your incentives, then it will not materialize the way you want it to be. Now, I think with pricing agents or agentic AI, the biggest issue is that it somehow breaks a little bit of what we are used to do. SaaS predominantly enables the user to be better. That's why we have seat-based pricing predominantly, right? I get better tools. Of course, with AI to some extent, that's also true, meaning I feel like I can write emails faster. I can go through meeting notes without, like investing so much time. But that's not the only thing. The real promise of value upside with agentic AI is that it takes on the work itself and delivers the outcome. But an outcome is not priced on how it enabled me, because if I hand over the work, then seat-based pricing doesn't seem to make sense. So personally, currently, how I see it is there is like a linear idea of pricing from maybe, let's say, a flat rate or one-time fee to, let's say, outcome-based pricing. And we try to figure out where it sits agentic AI. But I don't think that all of those AI use cases can be neatly mapped onto this very linear like kind of space. What I like is, and I'm not sure who came up with it, but the idea of looking at how much value it creates and how connected it is to the value creation. So if you have something that does the job for you, like an agentic AI, it does the task, it delivers the outcome. You don't have to intervene. And it's closely tied to something that how valuable it is. I think then it's very easy to say, hey, let's do outcome-based pricing. If you give me a qualified lead and that materializes in my CRM and they are like stellar leads and they're all convert, right? I will pay you X amount of dollars and everybody is happy. If you have something that has a low value impact and you cannot tie to a monetary contribution in your business, I don't know, like automatically getting like a list of to-dos from your calls, and you don't have to think about it. You just get like at the end of the day a summary of the follow-ups, right? I mean, it's nice, but my job doesn't depend on it. Am I willing as a company to say, like, you know what, let's pay a one-time fee and we'll just have a lifetime subscription and it just does it? Like, great, that works. But we wouldn't do an outcome-based pricing on it. Like if the to-dos are really nicely formatted and well written, you pay more or less. That's not how it works, right? So if you have those two dimensions, you would have like 4 cases, and you would need to figure out how to align incentives with the value provided. The technology transgresses our simplistic view of SaaS monetization, and we need to come up with smarter and better ways. Also, because I believe not every SaaS company is similar. We have a big category, we call it SaaS, but they're not all the same. And that's why not every SaaS company can have the same pricing, packaging, and so forth. And we're early, and it's a typical thing that first the technology materializes and only later do we figure out what are the right incentive structures to really make it shine.
I mean, that sounds great because of the fact that, I was actually thinking about outcome-based pricing that you spoke about, the outcome pricing model, and it's sweet to a customer's ears, right? I was researching about it as well, and it makes sense from a point of view that, if I was a customer, I would love to pay on an outcome-based model because it truly justifies the solution, right? But as you rightly said, it's not exactly possible for all the companies out there. Now, if you can shed a bit more light about it, I would love to understand why exactly it wouldn't be a feasible option for all the companies out there. But in the long run of things, you can actually see a lot of companies moving towards the outcome-based model.
Yeah. So I think as a first way of better understanding is look at whatever value you create, how would it map into this 2x2 matrix of the contribution and the distance to a contribution and the value? Like, so if you, let's say you have an AI and it creates an outcome and you don't have to intervene, is that a high or a low value outcome? Is it like something which is like nice to have and you can definitely sell it, but it's not like completely game changing. And both are fine, right? One industry might work over volume, the other one over via quality. The next thing is, how closely can you tie it to like a monetary or a value construct? If it's, let's say, something like a lead in your CRM that somebody else gives you, then it's very clear like how much it is worth, and outcome-based pricing makes more sense. Also, mind you that if you have a lead in, let's say you're in your sales cycle, this is something you can judge upon and act upon very quickly. There's other things which maybe are super valuable. Let's say anonymous feedback from all of your employees, and they have some sort of a digital ombudsman, meaning whatever is on their mind they can say, and the AI like consolidates like all the information, and you as a team can be healthier. That is not tied to a monetary like transaction or whatever. If it materializes that it improves the quality of your collaboration, it will not happen in 2 days because you're following up on a sales lead, right? It might take months or maybe even years, like improving the quality of your culture, but it's still over time incredibly valuable. So both businesses need to figure out how to price, let's say, an AI service, one that is not tied to a clear value case, but still is very advantageous for the company to engage with, and something that clearly creates high value upfront and easily, or it's more like, hey, it raises the level for everybody a little bit, right? But all of these outcomes are valid in terms of like there's businesses that run these, right? There's businesses who help me through like sales ops, and there's businesses who help me to improve the culture or the conversation, or like how I align my teams and communicate strategy. And you just need to understand that the incentive structures and how you price it will have to adapt to the use case. You cannot just say like, oh, because I'm using the technology AI, that is the right pricing model, or that is the right go to market. You have to understand the value that you're offering and how that can be easily communicated and fairly priced out, and not the other way around. But that to me is like a side conversation. So I'm more into the de-risking of the technology. I'm not an expert in sales and go to market. But what I do believe, why it's so important for people like me who are more on the technical side to look at sales and what's going on, is because I think we underestimate like the impact, the potential impact on that side of the house. Meaning you have to get that in order and understand what's going on. Otherwise, even the best technology will not succeed.
Now, lastly, Lucas, I mean, an important reality check. Just because we can deploy AI agents doesn't mean we should, right? So, where should organizations draw the line?
I wish I could give like super easy answers, because all those questions, I feel like I'm answering in such roundabout ways that people will say like, well, he talks a lot. I would say that is one of the questions you have to ask yourself every time you engage with AI. And there is this famous saying, the best code you can potentially write is the code you don't have to write. Any type of code incurs a debt, right? And every type of service you provide incurs a debt on the organization. So the question is not, can you throw stuff against the wall, but is it the right tool for the job? And I would say there is strong incentives right now to oversell AI, have agent washing, to, with your hammer in your hand, everything looks like nails. Now I have AI, I've mastered it. Like I need to like apply it in every space. I think it's a good practice to try and, whenever you plan on doing it, to firstly like, how far can I go if I don't use AI? And if the answer is the majority of the way, then please stay away from AI, whether it's agentic or not, because you want to focus your attention and your scarce resources on only the things that would not be possible to do without the technology. So we define business transformation as creating a business that otherwise would not have been able to exist. And I think that's, in a roundabout manner, but a very honest way, how I would phrase it. Try to not use AI and only use it where you have to. There, double down on it and go either even further.
I hope everyone, sticks to that. I don't see it in practice because of the fact that, the usage of AI is kind of, quadrupling, tripling, whatever we want to say. But at the same time, I don't think in the current scenario we're using it wherever it's a necessity. It's kind of become a habit, if I were to say that. Do you believe in that as well?
I would say there's also like this part which I think is fair, that we're trying out stuff. If you have a new toy, like you try to apply it wherever you can. And it's a learning experience. And I think we should cut some slack to people exploring the space, because there is something which in the industry we would call like the jagged frontier of AI. AI itself is moving so fast that even if you have an intuition today, a month from now, what you believed strongly could be wrong, right? Or believe strongly is right can turn out to be wrong, because the models get so much better so quickly, or like things can just turn around. So I think it's fair, if you're in a highly unintuitive and quickly moving space, to try things again, right? And go like maybe over apply the technology to some extent. But that's why I said, and every company needs to have ambidextrous teams or operating models, because you want to try out in a safer environment. Whether it works, no, it doesn't. Okay, try it again. Oh, now it works, or whatever. And only then move it into the bigger realm of like full enablement for all of your customers. But you are absolutely right. For now, at least, most companies are guilty of over communicating AI and putting it everywhere, because they feel like it curries favor with the markets, investors, or just maybe, I don't know, employees, or like the perceived prestige from we're so cool, we can put AI everywhere. But I think that's just a passing fad.
Thank you so much, Lucas. Amazing insights out there. And I actually don't have any, I asked you so many questions out of the side. I actually don't have any more questions to ask you because actually got some amazing. No, it's fine. I mean, as far as the conversation was great enough, absolutely. Well, some amazing insights out there, Lucas. Thank you so much for that. And really enjoyed hosting you on our podcast Tuesdays with Trailblazers. And thank you all for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, stay tuned with Tech Edge AI for more insights. Till we meet again, signing off, your host, Siddesh.